Hello everyone, my name is Francesco Cipollone. I'm the CEO and founder of Phoenix Security, and today we want to bring you another piece of research that we've done focusing on the CISA top routinely exploited vulnerability of 2022. Now, we crunched the number, we cut the data in different perspectives to actually look on category base, on exploitability base, what are the top vulnerability that we have available, as well as what are the top routinely exploited. Now, I would like to acknowledge the fact that CISA has been doing a wonderful work and job in collecting, analyzing, and assessing across different organizations, different countries, these top exploited vulnerabilities. Now, the CISA top routinely exploited vulnerability is a publication that gets published roughly around summer every year, and is a collaboration, as I said, across different countries, NCSC, New Zealand, and few others, together with, of course, the research work of CISA. Now, without further ado, let's dive deep in the data. Now, we've been dividing, as CISA advised, and kind of looked at things on the top 12 vulnerabilities and the various vendors that are related to those vulnerabilities. And you can see multiple products related to this. Microsoft, of course, has a lot of them, and we're going to see why, because of the attack surface. But in general, you have kind of a division during this section between top 12 and top 30. That is the second half and the second part of the top exploitable vulnerability. Now, in terms of vendors, the winner and losers, we have, of course, Microsoft, Atlassian, VMware, and the well-known vulnerability like Log4j and from Apache and Microsoft Exchange Server. So every of the well-known vulnerability that got exploited last year. The bubbles are here sized with the top vulnerabilities exploited, and the size of the bubble is, of course, the amount of vulnerability that are in the CISA top vulnerability place. Now, to give you a quick cut, Log4j, of course, and Log4Shell has been very popular, but of course, Exchange vulnerability and the others have been mostly focused and mostly critical. So if we want to cut this data set in the top 12 vulnerabilities, then we can see Microsoft, Fortinet, Atlassian, Apache with Log4j, and VMware with and as well with F5. Now, the rest of the more exploited, not that they're less exploited, but is the fundamentally still a quite significant number. Microsoft is still one of the big winner or loser, but we're going to analyze these because of the attack surface and the market capitalization of Microsoft. Now, if we want to cut it by typology and by CVSS, this is the average and more compounded CVSS score, looking at the sum of CVSS. Of course, Microsoft and Exchange Server, because they have multiple vulnerability, have the more compounded CVSS score across the board, followed by other vendors in the top 30. Now, in the top 12, Microsoft is still here, followed by Fortinet, and then, of course, Log4j in terms of size and in terms of number of vulnerabilities. Now, if we do this analysis by EPSS, the landscape doesn't change too much, with Microsoft, Fortinet being prevalent. Log4j gets a little bit behind in terms of number and compounded elements because of the number of vulnerabilities that are in there. While as well, the top 30 remain more or less in a similar structure and with a similar kind of distribution. Now, looking at the market capitalization, we can see here the number of vulnerability, specifically in CISA-KEV, and the total number of vulnerability, and how much is the market capitalization. We're going to see as well the number of product line and product that are in CISA-CAV and in MVD, and we can see kind of a matching where the market capitalization is high and the number of product is high. That means that fundamentally you have a wider attack surface. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have more vulnerability in a single product. The probably signal that we should look at is where you have a vendor with very high market capitalization, but just with one or two products with a lot of vulnerability. Now, Android, of course, has a number of versions of operating system that are vulnerable, together with Apple that is scoring here. Hence why there are these kind of nodes and spikes there. Now, if we look at number of products in CISA-CAV, and of course in the MVD, you can see, for example, Microsoft has 800 products with 262 products just in CISA-CAV. So that's a wide attack surface. And if we go back to the top exploited vulnerability, you can see here that Microsoft is still pretty much a winner or a large presence in the top exploited vulnerability from the 2022. And this is because the attack surface is wide. Now, if we look at MVD, or National Vulnerability Database, that is the wider landscape of exploited vulnerability, Microsoft is there with a presence of 808, but is getting dwarfed by the number of product line and product registered in the MVD with vulnerability in Cisco. And hence we wanted to dive deeper and look at the number of vulnerabilities in MVD by product line, by the top vendors in CISA. And we can see that more or less the original composition stays the same, with a consistent number of vulnerabilities in total across the board. And this is due to the landscape and the attack surface of a lot of these products. We're going to see maybe in the future a little bit of more analysis by timeline of resolution. That could be something interesting we focus on. But in general, you have different methodology of attack in CISA-CAV, and especially in the top vulnerability, top exploited and exploitable vulnerability of 2022. And remote code execution has been probably the more prevalent, with privilege escalation and arbitrary code execution to be followed suit, with a couple of mention. Now, if we look at the landscape of changes over the years of this type of vulnerability in the National Vulnerability Database, you can see fundamentally remote code execution having a stable state, a number 2, and arbitrary code execution or code execution that is similar to RCE in this particular diagram being a close follower and in the same category. So those are the typical vulnerability that are registered in the National Vulnerability Database. Now, I hope this was useful and gave you a bigger and broader overview of the top exploited vulnerability of CISA-CAV and CISA in the 2022. My name is Francesco Cipollone. I would like to leave you with a last message, that is CISA-CAV and top exploited vulnerability are a fantastic source of exploitability and information, but don't, of course, just stop there, because there is more information lying around and you can rely on in terms of exploitability, like EPSS, or if a particular of these vulnerability or new vulnerability are getting attacked or are targeting you specifically as individual or as a vendor. Because those are the more exploited vulnerability at scale. Doesn't necessarily mean that a spear attack against one of your product line or one of your product might be blinded. So don't focus just on this. It's a good signal to prioritize vulnerability at scale in your product line from your software perspective, and like Log4j, Spring4Shell, and so on. and as well in your more traditional infrastructure. This is Francesco Cipollone. If you want to have this overview, Phoenix Security can give you this and more signal to jump quickly. I hope this was useful and informational. Stay safe out there and prioritize and don't burn out. See ya.
Phoenix. Fix vulnerabilities today before attackers exploit them tomorrow.